Good Sunday morning, Shindo here. I'd like to talk about the ban on Muslim countries. Let me start by saying I'm no fan of the Muslim faith any more than I am the Christian or the Jews. I have nothing against any of them personally. I have plenty against their religion. But a precedent is being set by this regime, Donald Trump regime, that is absolutely dangerous to any of us who are not Christian. If you haven't heard, when Donald Trump came into office, he got rid of any kind of reference to any other religion. All the symbology that was in the White House, he left one cross in the chapel. What we have here is a man who fully believes that the Christian religion is being persecuted. 2.5 billion people, the most populous religion by far in this world. And of course, as you see in any kind of sociology, the most populous, the majority, goes after the biggest minority, which is Muslims. We've got a crusade here, folks. It's already started. As far as Donald Trump is concerned, we've got a crusade. Christians against the Muslims, which will inevitably lead to major destruction. But that aside, I'd rather discuss right now the implications of a Muslim ban, which is what we're seeing right now. The implications of Muslims as being other also is going to affect all of us who are not Christian. In the long run, maybe even in the short run, you're going to start seeing liberal Christians being attacked as well. I just got a comment on my Madonna video, I think it was yesterday, day before yesterday, that said, I wish Trump was Hitler, then we could gas these liberals. Yeah, that's the kind of mentality that is reigning with these types of folks. Now look, I've been dealing with these types of folks long before Donald Trump was even on the scene, but now they've got a hero in Donald Trump. Let me read this article from the Associated Press. Despair and confusion reigns as Trump's travel ban hits. An Iraqi pleaded for his life to President Donald Trump, a longtime New Yorker, born in Syria, wondered how he would go home from a trip abroad. Church groups, geared up to welcome refugee families, looked in dismay at homes prepared for families that may never arrive. Despair and confusion set in Saturday among citizens of 7 predominantly Muslim countries who found themselves abruptly unable to enter the United States a day after Trump signed an order he billed as a necessary step to stop, quote, radical Islamic terrorists, unquote, from coming to the U.S. Included is a 90-day ban on travel to the U.S. by citizens of Iraq, Syria, Iran, Sudan, Libya, Somalia, or Yemen, and a 120-day suspension of the U.S. refugee program. Travelers from these nations were either barred from getting on their flights or detained at U.S. airports after they landed, including tourists, foreign students, and people trying to visit friends and family. Quote, what's next? What's going to happen next? Unquote, asked Mohammed al-Rawi, an Iraqi-born American citizen in the Los Angeles area, after his 69-year-old father, coming to visit his grandchildren in California, was abruptly detained and sent back to Iraq after 12 hours in custody. Quote, are they going to create camps for Muslims and put us in? Yes. After an appeal from civil liberties lawyers, a federal judge in New York issued an emergency order Saturday night barring the U.S. from summarily deporting people who had arrived with valid visas or an approved refugee application. U.S. District Judge Ann Donnelly said travelers had a strong argument that their legal rights had been violated. Her order, though, only affected a portion of Trump's order. The ruling came as protests broke out in several U.S. airports where travelers were being held, including a gathering of several hundred people outside of San Francisco's main airport and a raucous demonstration of at least 2,000 people at New York's Kennedy International Airport. Hamid Khalid Darwish, a translator and assistant for the U.S. military in Iraq for 10 years, now fleeing death threats, was among at least a dozen people detained at New York Kennedy Airport, their arrivals Friday and Saturday. People are being arrested for simply being from another country, folks. Detained. Excuse me, they're not technically arrested, they're just jailed. He walked free Friday after his lawyers and 2 members of Congress went to the airport to try to gain his release. It took 2 members of Congress to go down there, folks. Quote, this is the soul of America, unquote, Darwish told a crowd of demonstrators and reporters, adding that the U.S. was home to, quote, the greatest people in the world, unquote. Others were less lucky. Paris Falhaford, 24, arrived after a long trip from Tehran, Iran, only to be detained and told she had to go home. Quote, she was crying and she told me she was banned to come inside and go through the gates, unquote, said her husband, Mohammed Zandain, 26, an Iranian doctoral student at Ohio State University. He was hoping to get her out of the country on a late-night flight to avoid her being jailed again until Monday. Jailed. Staff of the U.S. agency that resettles refugees were scrambling to analyze the order and girded for the wrenching phone calls that would have to be made to the thousands of refugees just days away from traveling to the U.S. Several staff who spoke to the AP burst into tears as they contemplated the future for people who had waited years to come into this country. Quote, it is complete chaos, unquote, said Melina Nazar, policy director for HIAS, one of 9 refugee settlement agencies that work with the U.S. State Department. The International Refugee Assistance Project, which aids foreign nationals targeted for their work for the U.S. government as well as other refugees, was sending the same message to asylum seekers, most of them who had been waiting for years. Mathak Analabi, also a refugee from Iraq, was hoping to soon be reunited with her twin 18-year-old daughters who are in Baghdad. Alabi, her husband, a son, and another daughter were settled last August in Tennessee as the twins completed their government reviews to enter the U.S. After Trump signed the order, she spoke by phone with her daughters. Quote, they are so worried and afraid because they're stuck there in Baghdad, unquote, Alabi said Saturday. Quote, they are young and they are strong, but I am crying all the time. I miss them, unquote. And an Iraqi in Mosul, an Iraqi city where the Islamic State group has seized control, despaired at word that what he had thought was an imminent flight to safety in America was now canceled indefinitely. Quote, if you can write to Mr. Trump or find any other way to help me reunite my family, please, I'm dying in Iraq, please, unquote. The man whose identity was withheld because he is still in danger in Iraq wrote back to his U.S. lawyer and by email. There's no good writing to them. These people don't give a shit, folks. The order was also caused confusion for longtime legal U.S. residents traveling abroad. Kenan Asma, a clarinetist born in Syria who has lived in the U.S. for 16 years, left his home in New York City 3 weeks ago for a series of concerts that included a date with cellist Yo-Yo Ma. Now, he doesn't know if he will be able to return home. Quote, "I don't know what's going on," unquote, Asma told the Associated Press by phone Saturday from Lebanon. Quote, "It is home as much as Damascus," unquote, he said of New York City. Quote, "I really don't know how to react," unquote. Before Trump signed the order, more than 67,000 refugees had been approved by the federal government to enter the U.S., says Jen Smears, Refugee Policy Director for Church World Services. Church! More than 6,400 had already been booked on flights, including 15 families that had been expected over the next few weeks in the Chicago area from Ethiopia, Eritrea, Iran, Syria, and Uganda. The bulk of refugees entering the U.S. are settled by religious groups who organize churches, synagogues, and mosques to collect furniture, clothes, and toys for the refugees and set up volunteer schedules for hosting duties. All that work ground to a halt after Trump signed the order. In Massachusetts, Jewish Family Services of Metro West had been coordinated a group of doctors, community leaders, a local mosque, and other volunteers to resettle 15 Syrian families, including a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old who arrived Tuesday. Now, 2 fully outfitted apartments remain empty, and it's unclear when, if ever, the other refugees will be allowed to enter, said Mark Jacobs, chief executive of the Jewish Service Group. Noor Alyet of Valparaiso, India, said her sister, a Syrian living in Saudi Arabia, was sent back after arriving from Rahad in Chicago's O'Hare International Airport on Saturday, and told she couldn't enter the U.S. to help care for their sick mother. Alyet said some officials at the airport were apologizing to her sister, who had a valid visa. Quote, "My mom was already having pain enough to go through this on top of the pain that she's having," Alyet said. Well, folks, this is what you voted for if you voted for Trump. And don't think that it's going to stop with Muslims. And yes, this is a Muslim ban on foreigners. Now, it's a Muslim ban on foreigners. Foreigners. Next, they're going to start looking into Muslims here in this country. And when they start that, it is not going to be long before they start looking at you. You. Most of my subscribers, at least the ones that have been with me for a while, are not Christians. And they certainly, I would hope that those of you who are Christians understand what's wrong with this policy. It's not going to end with Muslims. This was the first video I did about Donald Trump. The very first one, which I did about a year ago. It was in January. It was in January, so it must have been a year ago, a little over a year ago. The very first video I did is it won't stop with Muslims when he becomes president. I've been talking about Donald Trump becoming president since then. Openly referring to him as who he is. This Muslim ban, do you think this is going to help any of our fight against ISIS or fight against any Islamic extremist. This is exactly what these Islamic extremists want. And the United States of America is becoming a country that I, as an American, am ashamed to be in. Not because of Donald Trump. You know, Donald Trump, he's only a response to the kind of people that I have been dealing with here online. And many of you, I'm sure, who have videos, many of you who have popular YouTube channel know exactly what I'm talking about. The society itself is breaking apart. People don't know how to speak to each other, and hatred and anger, resentment is reigning supreme. And I think that more than anything else is what we're exporting to other countries, is American hate. This is the ugly American at its worst that I've ever seen it in my lifetime. I mean, it harkens back to years ago, years and years ago. The racist and bigoted American. It's sickening to watch, and it's going to affect you. You think, oh, I'm an atheist, it doesn't affect me. Yes, it will. Because if you are not a Christian, and a fundamentalist Christian who voted for Trump, then you're going to be part of the great masses of people that will be termed as the other, the them. We are now the them, folks. And that's not a good place to be when you've got people who have grown up on bullshit like Alex Jones, bullshit like Mark Dice, people like this who foster this environment of hatred, who thrive in it, and they're people. It's a sickening place to be, and this is what the country has become. This is Shindo. Have a good Sunday.